you, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to close this session with a talk which will be in no way comprehensive, because in 15 minutes there's no way you can actually deal with omics and give a comprehensive state-of-the-art lecture. That's my only conflict of interest for this lecture. I just love science. And when I discuss with young medical students that come to me and say, I wonder whether I should be an intensivist or an oncologist, I often tell them, it depends. I mean, if you want to basically have a lot of positive clinical trials, sometimes with 200 patients, you can be an oncologist. If you want to be treating the same patients, have less positive clinical trials, then you can be an intensivist. Still, you will improve patient outcome, and you will be starting on a quest, and the quest will be the quest for biomarkers or for indicators that will tell you actually how you can decide who would deserve a given treatment. And indeed, if you actually look at this quest for a biomarker, the issue is not only to diagnose patient with infection or patient with sepsis. The issue is really to try to find indicators that will tell you who can benefit for a given treatment. The issue is to pave the way for precision medicine in sepsis. And there are a lot of parallels between cancer and sepsis. I urge you to read this excellent paper by Richard Kiss in the New England Journal, where he will show you that a lot of the targets for miracle drugs today in cancer have a strong role to play in the pathophysiology of sepsis. But this is where the parallel actually ends, because we may be on the same road, but we are definitely not going at the same speed. And part of this is again related to biomarkers. This is because they got biomarkers that they transformed disease of the blood in many subtypes of leukemia and lymphoma that today get a very specific and efficient treatment. We deal with the same omics. We live in the same omics era: genomics, transcriptomics, epigenetics, proteomics, metabolomics, you name it. We can use the same methodology. We can use the same technology. But if you put the name of your favorite omics in PubMed, and the numbers may be wrong because the slide is a year old, and if you combine this with cancer, you can still see something. But if you do omics plus sepsis, take good glasses, because you are not going to see anything. And part of this comes because of lack of sustained investment in research, and because of also maybe poor translational dialogue. Still, we have some successes, and I'd like to highlight some of them. I don't have the time to deal with everything. I will just show you one example of pharmacogenomics that may have been useful, maybe not to trash a drug, that I've used at the bedside and that I think have made changes in some patients. If you look at the response to activated protein C, actually there are some genotypes that can actually help you predict who can actually respond in terms of improved survival. But this is really within the field of disease characterization that we can think of making huge progress if we move on and apply omics, this omics technology. Jean-Paul was a pioneer in thinking about genetic predisposition to sepsis when he published a paper in JAMA 20 years ago now, Jean-Paul. It's been a long time ago. When we looked in the Genocept cohorts at patients with a disease, community-acquired pneumonia, and tried to identify, using a genome-wide approach, whether some genetic polymorphism would be associated with improved outcome or worse outcome, we were actually looking for what would actually drive you to have worse outcome and mortality. We actually found a polymorphism that was significantly associated with improved survival in the FAR gene, a related tyrosine kinase encoding gene, that again was associated with survival advantage in patients with pneumonia in the discovery as well as in several replication cohorts, making us think that maybe this is becoming a more robust result. Now, if you move to the field of transcriptomics and look at how genes are modulated, really we may think of being in a pond where we can fish relevant biomarkers. We may look at how genes are upregulated or downregulated in patients with infection with that patient and in patients without infection, but still with, I would say, the sepsis criteria. Look at signatures that would drive you to think about a specific pathogen or a specific host response, and these may be the type of integrated signature we are looking at when we want to define what will help us to move precision medicine to the bedside in the ICU as well as in oncology. It's been done already in pediatric septic shock. I like very much this paper by Hector Wong and colleagues where they looked at gene expression for roughly 100 of class-defining genes. When gene expression was up, it's in red. When gene expression was down, it's in blue. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to see that these patterns may actually be different. Subclass A and subclass B may look different looking at the gene signature and the transcriptomic response. And indeed, they also have different outcome. Patients with subclass A, pediatric patients with septic shock and subclass A, as you can see, had actually an increased mortality as compared to patients with subclass B. And what I found was interesting in this paper is that they also had a differential response to corticosteroids, driving us again closer to something that may look one day as precision medicine. Out of this 100 classifying genes, they had basically 80 genes that were encoding protein and derived from that a persevere score that was looking at 12 biomarkers, 12 protein biomarkers. And they further refined this looking at mRNA signature as well, and were able actually to improve the diagnosis and the prognostic accuracy of this, looking at terminal nodes that were associated with worse outcome. So it's feasible in pediatric septic shock, it seems. And maybe it's coming also to adult septic shock. In this, I would say, very interesting study coming from the Oxford group, they looked at transcriptomic response in patients, again, with community-acquired pneumonia, 265 patients with community-acquired pneumonia. And they found that there was a signature response, a molecular transcriptomic response that was associated with worse outcome. The patient with the SRS1 transcriptomic response actually had lower survival rates, and they also had a profile that was more anti-inflammatory, if you will. And very interestingly, when they redone the analysis in patients with a different disease, peritonitis, they found that the vast majority of the sepsis response was conserved and similar between patients with pneumonia and patients with peritonitis. There were some differences, obviously, but still developing this anti-inflammatory profile, this immunosuppressive profile, was associated with worse outcome. And you're going to tell me, yes, so what? I mean, is this just something so that we can send bad news to the family? No, maybe you can actually target specific patient. And I'd like to show you this case report published by David Grimaldi when he joined the Erasmus team, where they were looking after a 30-year-old patient after the terrorist bombing in Brussels. And this poor patient actually developed a quite uncommon complication because she developed mucormycosis. And we all know that without complete surgical treatment, despite, I would say, antifungal therapy, in this patient, they actually die. And this type of patients are not supposed to develop mucormycosis. But they were able to actually define that in this patient, after surgery, after the bombing, she had actually a massively immunosuppressive profile, and they targeted this patient with immunoadjuvant therapy, including nivolumab, and the patient survived. And that's probably one of the very successful case and very, I would say, good demonstration that you can do precision medicine at the bedside today in 2017. Now, let's try to switch gear and think about how we could do a better job. And this is about defining endotypes. Great study by Tom van der Poel's group in the Netherlands, where they looked at 522 patients, and they've done basically transcriptomics also in this patient with sepsis. They had a discovery cohort and tried to look at endotypes. And what they mean by endotype is that they used two different strategies. One which was supervised approach. You have the diagnosis, you group patients based on this diagnosis, and one unsupervised, where you're basically looking at how genes actually cluster based on their transcriptomic response, again, looking at blood leukocyte transcriptomics. Doing so, they identify basically 4 blood gene expression endotypes, 4 categories of gene patterns, and as you can see, one of those was actually associated with worse outcome. What they called MARS1 was associated with increased 28-day and 1-year mortality. And when they combined Apache-4 scoring and endotype, they clearly improved patient risk stratification. They were able, obviously, to look at which type of genes were upregulated and downregulated. And clearly, when you actually collapse down what started as a genome-wide approach, they basically end up with a 140 gene molecular signature, which is basically manageable today at the bedside for, I would say, less money than we spend on many of the tests we do today in the ICU. What we've learned from this type of approach is basically that looking at leukocyte genomics with a supervised approach, where you basically classify patients based on the disease, what we decide is a disease, although we are looking at syndromes. Obviously, you can look at the genes that are going up and down, and it's telling you things about biology. But looking at unsupervised approach, you can define endotypes that actually correlate with prognosis. And again, this may be one of the key of our movement toward precision medicine. And the future is this. That's really precision medicine. And it's happening today in cancer, where they are grouping molecular data, clinical variables, demographic information in huge database. And I can only applaud to the effort by the SRLF to move into this big data era. Because doing so, you can actually use data gathered on thousands of patients to make actually individual decisions. And actually, that requires the type of big data approach that we've seen. Omics is complex. We are not only looking at genomics, transcriptomics, and so on. And if you have 1 hour, and if you want to have fun, look at this translational study with an N of 1. I call this the Snyderome, published in Cell in 2012. They looked at the whole biological profile from Mike Snyder over a period of 14 months, as he actually got called, as we do. And what they found in this study is basically that they were able to have a very high coverage genomic and transcriptomic data, and actually were able to track which gene would predispose him to become diabetic when after an infection, which actually happened to him, to know which type of treatment he would need, because he had predisposition, genetic predisposition to have a good response to certain type of anti-diabetic agents, and actually to learn, and that was in a follow-up study over 60 months, how what we do, what we live through in terms of exposure to environment and so on, actually change everything, including our microbiome. That's the future, and I'd like to end up by quoting Steve Jobs, that said that the biggest innovation in the 21st century will probably be at the intersection between technology and biology. Thank you very much for your attention.